Hello and welcome to the Hemet Film Festival podcast. I'm Gabriel Diaz, one of the co-founders and the podcast host, and joining me today is Michael Tennant, actor, producer, composer, director, musician, just about everything you could throw at someone who is talented and creative. And thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
You're very welcome. That made me sound so much more impressive than I am.
I think you sell yourself
Great
short.
intro. I should want to bring you everywhere to do intros for me from now on.
I'll be the in front of you throwing feathers and joining us today.
Yes.
So, Michael, first and foremost, I mean, we've known each other now, what, 6, 7 years, maybe 10? I'm drawing a blank on exactly when we met. It would have been Marty's.
I'm thinking it's probably closer to 15 or 16.
Has Marty's been that long? Oh my God. I think you might be right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lose all track of age after a certain point. Yeah. No, you would be right. It would have been 2010-ish, 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, yes, those of you who maybe listened to Daniel's podcast episode and watched the Marty's Magnificent Dayglow Dreamathon, Michael was Dr. Dream in that and absolutely crushed it. Performed some of the numbers too. Pudding Babies was one of the ones you sang on.
Yeah, it was. We recorded that one here in the house.
Yes, yeah.
And in the backyard. You know what? One of the funniest memories of that was because there is a school that's on the other side of me and this huge field. And it was a summer day. And I just remember we were like, well, we're going to film in this school, but we had no permission or anything like that. We were like, we're just going to take it over, get the shots we need and get out of there before anybody realizes what we were doing. And this I don't know, it was like secret agent stuff going on. I just remember like started tossing all the bags over the wall. We put a ladder going from my house to the school, every climbing down the ladder. Then we're done climbing back up the ladder and all the other cars driving in, bringing the big equipment in, get the shots and bam, out before anybody knew about it.
Yeah, it was like the little league dugout kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm surprised.
It was wild. Yeah, I remember that. We were just chucking like stands and things over the fence, trying to get everyone over really quick. It was a warmer day. You're in full like pallor makeup. I think you had streaks put into your hair. You have to wear
Yeah.
an arm cast, not a cast, but like a sling. And everyone's in lab coats and they're carrying these pudding babies, which were technically edible.
I still have one.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
Yeah. What was the experience of having to bite the head off of one of those?
It it just, it just tasted like dough.
Yeah, it was like uncooked dough.
Yeah, like uncooked dough. I mean, it was cooked sort of, but not well. If I would have swallowed it, probably would have ended up with a good stomach ache. I don't know. Uh, but it was just like biting into I don't know, like a Thanksgiving roll or something like that you'd eat.
Like a Pillsbury Doughboy kind of roll, just random
Yeah,
thing.
something like that.
So, how did you get connected with Daniel to get involved in the movie?
Corey Howdy Show.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, he was one of my really, really good friends growing up. I met him in preschool, and somehow we both hit it off. And then we ended up at the same elementary school together later. And yeah, we were really good friends for a few years. And then he changed schools, but we still stayed pretty good friends and still stayed in contact even to this day. I don't get to see him nearly as much as I would like to, but still see him now and then. It's always good to see him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And yeah, so he asked me. Actually, he said, "Hey, I'm in this hippie cream band, and I'd heard some of their stuff before. He'd like shared some of their music with me, and then he said, we're doing this movie, and would you want to be a part in it?" And I was just, oh, absolutely. I want to be a part of anything Corey's doing. It's fun. So, I didn't know what to expect, and then Daniel kind of reached out and contacted me and started talking to me about this Dr. Dream character, and still had no idea really what to expect, but with a hippie cream project, you never do.
No, not at all.
Yeah, you just kind of go along with that. And so I went over for the read through, and I think that no, I'm not sure. I don't think I met you at the read through. I think I met you on the first day of filming,
That sounds right. Yeah.
and you picked me up and you were driving me around, made me feel important.
Yeah.
Had
Your
a driver,
chauffeur.
yeah, and you only had to drive me down the block, but it was still very nice. 15 seconds or so of being chauffeured about.
Yeah, that was when I was doing the producer sort of approach to things. So I was just trying to get everyone on time, trying to get everyone where they needed to be. It
Yeah.
was a great like crash course on meeting you. Getting to be like, okay, I know nothing about this guy, and he's about to have to play one of the more wacky characters I've ever experienced. So this will be fun. And then for our listeners, Corey Howdyshell is the older brother of Wesley Howdyshell from episode two, who's one of the co-founders. They're both in Hippie Cream, but it's Corey was originally in it, and then Wesley folded into it, as you can hear in that episode. So yeah, so you get involved with Marty's Magnificent. You're at the read through. What's your thoughts as you're kind of hearing about this movie, your character, what's going on? Are you just chomping at the bit? Is it, you said you're used to the sort of hippie cream approach of like, you don't know what it's going to be?
Yeah, and I've never met Daniel before that night. I mean, I talked to Daniel through email and stuff, but he met me at the door that night, and that was my first time seeing him. And I just remember being what I was thinking most of all is like the scope of this whole thing. Because I think, what were you guys? You guys were just barely out of high school at that point, right?
Yeah, I think Daniel had just finished or was still at San Jose getting his degree. So we would have been around like 22-ish, maybe.
Yeah. And so I was just looking at the scope of everything that he was telling me that he was going to do. And this isn't the conversation that you would typically have with a 22-year-old. It was sort of like, okay, here's the script, and here is the huge team that I have assembled, and here is the shooting schedule that we're going to do this, and we're going to have this edited, and here is my team. And when Daniel starts like, showing all you guys, it's like, what a team. Even at 20, early 20s, you've got Steven right there who's going to be doing all this animated work and, whatever special effects you need. It's like, I feel like I was just got brought in and was meeting the A team over here. I don't know. It was just like hearing him, like I have never heard a 22, 23-year-old have a conversation like this. It was so well thought out. I mean, I've been in meetings with adults much older and much more experiences that were not as planned out as this movie was. And you listen to the title, Marty's Magnificent Dayglow Dreamathon, full of characters like Dr. Dream and Pudding Babies and Peepaw. And you don't expect for this to be something that is so well planned out. And yet it is. And if you go back and you like watch the movie, whether it's a movie that you like, whether it's a movie that you don't like, I don't think that you can argue that it isn't really well made and well done, especially by someone just of that age, just starting off. And he's, Daniel's gone on to do so much more after that, even sharpen the skills. But this early work was so impressive. And then I started looking at his, he showed me some of his even earlier stuff, like Brosis and stuff like that. And the guy's a genius, just hands down.
Absolutely. But I mean, I would also say too that I don't know that Marty's would be quite as just fascinating and fun and interesting if we didn't have you in that role of Dr. Dream. That character is to a certain degree a linchpin of that film, like expressing the kind of, as you put it, like whatever your take is on that film, it exists very well done. And so like I feel like that your character establishes that for us. If your character had been someone else and it had been poor, I think that movie would not have kept any audience member going into the later parts of it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Like I often think, like what would have happened if like Matthew McConaughey were put in that part. And you're right, the movie would have failed.
I mean, that was our option B, but
Yeah. Yeah. And we went with option A.
yeah.
That's all we can say there. So, but then again, that goes back to the directorial genius.
I'd honestly too, the biggest part with interacting with you is learning about your humility. That's been the
Yeah, for everybody watch. I should clarify that past minute was a joke, just
yes.
for people like, wow, does he really think that? What a jerk! With like,
No, I think everyone could appreciate the bit that was going on there. Well,
here's
I mean,
a
also too, you mentioned that you knew Corey since, was it elementary or preschool? What was the exact
preschool.
preschool?
Yeah,
Was that in Hemet? Was that elsewhere?
yeah, it was in Hemet. We went to Trinity Lutheran Preschool
Wow.
together, and yeah, I don't know. I have some of my earliest memories. I can still like, picture him in class and us being out on the playground, just little flashes. I must have been like, maybe 3 to 4 years old, but I still can't remember it.
That's stellar. So were you a Hemet native? Did you move when you were real young, or were you always here?
Survivor of Hemet Hospital. I was born here, and I heard all about the Hemet curse. If you try to leave, you're bound to come back. So I just never went away. I don't need to deal with that curse, so I'm just going to end up back here. So I just never left.
Yeah. If you're lost in the forest, F it, build a home kind of thing.
Yeah, you know.
That's funny. I rarely meet other people who were born at the Hemet Hospital too. So I didn't know we had that connection, Mike.
Well, there's just a few of us that made it out.
Touche, touche. So I guess the biggest question then is you're born and raised in Hemet. When did you start realizing that acting and just sort of this creative part was something you really found value in?
Um, I like to tell stories, and I guess that was probably um, should have been like my earliest clue on it. And it's not that I always wanted to be an actor, but I like to tell stories, and it would often get me in a lot of trouble because I realized, early on when I was really young, a story is more interesting if it's told in the first person. So people would think, I would tell them stories and they would get upset and, assume I was lying to them. And I had to, walk this very fine line because I was really little when I figured this out. And so I would tell them, you know, yeah, so one day I went to the store and there was a strange man and he tried to kidnap me, but and I hit, and then people like, oh my goodness. And they find out, wait a minute, none of this ever happened. That he was lying to us. And it wasn't that I was wanted to lie. I wanted to tell them a story and take them along for the ride. And I didn't realize that, what a, this could turn bad. But
Unintentionally, the boy who cried wolf, not realizing it.
yeah, I just wanted to like draw people in and entertain them, that was just an example. I don't ever think I told anyone that somebody tried to kidnap me, but
Of
it
course,
would,
yeah.
but I would tell like stories like that, and so I found this forest behind the house, and or I'd tell a story that like I saw something on TV, but I put myself in it, and like yeah, and there I was. I walked inside of a wardrobe, and I was in this place called Narnia, and like oh, we've never heard this one before, but so then I had to like be more picky about what stories I would insert myself, to. But yeah, I always just like to tell stories to people and entertain them, and then acting was kind of an extension of that. And whether it be writing a story or acting in a story or writing a play or something like that, I just like to tell stories.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, even when I met you, you'd start selling a story and it would be engaging and engrossing, but I'd be sitting there going like, did this happen? What, wait, did he meet the president or is he just telling me? This sounds a lot like Forrest Gump. Like, it's just that level of like, but there is a thing of once you kind of had that understanding, I enjoyed every conversation we had because there was never a rote or sameness that you can get with people. It was never just a, hey, Mike, how's the weather? All right, cool. We had our conversation for the day. It was always like, I'm going to be entertained.
That's, it's funny. That's one thing that it makes me really uncomfortable is small talk. I can't do it with people. If all I have to talk about is just how's the weather? Hey, you catch the ball game the other day, or I can't do it. And it's funny because I often have, I'm going to word this like carefully, but I have a low kind of tolerance for the amount of time I can be around people.
Mm, like
I
a
don't know.
social threshold.
It gets a little uncomfortable for me. In like, I mean, I could sit here and have a conversation with you for a long time because it's, we're actually talking about stuff. But if it was just oh, Gabe, good to see you. You come to the store often? Try the salami. Okay, it like, I don't know. It just doesn't. It feels fake. It doesn't feel connected, like a forced conversation, and that makes me pretty uncomfortable.
I agree with you. There's a certain like disingenuousness that happens from that of just going through the motions with someone as opposed to trying to have a conversation where you're like, I am appreciating you for who you are and the things that we share in a conversation.
Yeah, and then if it does get to there, if somebody comes up and like, hey, ooh, nice weather we're having, I get so uncomfortable. I default to what I'm used to, and yeah, you want to know about when I met the president? We, we go there. So if I do end up telling you a story like that, you're probably making me uncomfortable.
Good to know. I think I've made you uncomfortable a lot in our interactions then, Mike.
That's probably
Okay, so you're going through this, you're starting to understand that like you love telling a story, which you are incredibly skilled at. I would say, for the listeners, we'll probably get to it, but I've worked with Mike obviously on Marty's, but also at his productions with Play with Your Food and doing theater and having him as a director and a fellow actor. And there's never a dull moment. So when like did you head off to school? Did you stay throughout Hemet? Like what was your next path as you're like, oh, you're starting to understand that you like telling a story, you like where it's going. What starts to feel like, all right, this is what how I'm gonna get there or how I'm gonna do it.
so. I was in a interesting circumstance in that I love to tell stories, but I didn't want to get on stage to do it. I was extremely shy. I had terrible stage fright, and I had this terrible fear of rejection, which is not good for anybody that wants to be in the theatrical world. Is it's just, most of everything that you're going to get is rejection, and how can you go on stage if you've got severe stage fright? And so I was, brave enough to go to the local community college here and enroll in the theater classes. But I was just happy to be in the environment. Like I would walk into that theater and it was magic. Like I would go there when nobody was there and just walk around on the stage in the theater. I just loved, I don't know, that place. It was like this is going to sound so dramatic. Going to make fun of myself for it later, but it was like I don't know, like a sanctuary. It's like you walk in there, or I don't know, there's something safe and spiritual about it. Walking around on the stage and feeling the history of all the actors that had come before. And now I'm like standing alone in this room with like the ghosts of all these memories. Some of these actors still living, some of them not. But it's like they were all here once in this place. And I was just in awe of this stage. And it's gotten that way for like all stages. Like I want to go in and know the history of the theater, what was shown on the stage, like what are the plays that were here, who are the actors that were here. I do that to Broadway too. Like I've been out to New York. I usually go about once a year and go see shows out there. And I look up the history of the theater, and it's like I want to know when I set foot in that stage, or not on the stage, but I'd be promptly removed. But into the theater, like how long has the theater been there? And you start, if you look it up, like you can look up the history of the theaters, and those theaters have been there, some of them for, like maybe like 100 years. And think of all the great actors who have come through those theaters and performed on those stages, or, right where you are now, in a different time. But it's like, man, everything's coming together like right there. And that's sort of what it is for me when I, go on the stage now. It's never monotonous. It's like, there is something that's about to happen. Like, I'm going to go on stage and there is an audience coming in, and I'm going to bring everything that I have to this audience. If I'm feeling at my best, if I'm feeling at my worst, I'm still going to give them everything I have. And when people say, no, you have to pace yourself, the audience is never going to get a pace yourself performance from me. Like, I will give them everything I have with every show. And I've often thought, like, maybe I will die on stage one day. I don't know. Like, you hear some people do it, but it's like, I will give my all for that audience that comes to see the show, because it's like a magic experience. But anyway, all that to say, so I was a very shy person, and would wander around the MSJC, the Mount San Jacinto College Theater out here, and I just love the atmosphere of it all. And I wanted to be involved somehow. And even if it was just the person that swept the floor after the show or opened and closed the theater curtain, I wanted to do that. But more and more, I don't know, I started to watch the other performers and start to wonder, like, deep down, could I do this? But I was so quiet. They nicknamed me Quiet Mike. And nobody was expecting me to get up on stage and do anything, like, to perform, because I was so shy and so quiet. But then, I don't know, something was stirring up in me, and I don't know, I watched one of the main performers up there, and he was really good, but I was thinking, I was watching him perform, and I was like, I bet I could do that. And then another part of myself immediately answered, well, then why don't you do that? If you could do that, you should do that. Otherwise, what's the point in being able to do that if you're not going to do it? And so I was like, well, okay, then I'll maybe give it a shot. But I couldn't do it at Mount San Jacinto because I'd already labeled myself as Quiet Mike. And I don't know, I was kind of stereotyped before I even did an audition there. So I had to go audition at another theater and actually started getting my acting experience there, at Lifehouse Theater, which is in Redlands, California.
Okay.
And they do all original scripts, or probably at least 95% of everything that they do is original, and they're always generating their own material. And so I started watching this too. And I didn't know that this was a possibility, because this place went against everything that I learned in college. Like like I learned in college how professional actors should work and professional directors, and how, a show should come together. And then I went to Lifehouse Theater, and it was anything but what I had just learned. It was chaos. Like there were people working around the clock there. And this theater performs 45 weeks out of the year, I believe. And they'll do 4 to 5, 6 shows a week sometimes. Always Saturdays are always 2 shows. And so the shows tend to run for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I started to get like really good acting training there, because I'd get cast in a part and would perform in front of a lot of different audiences and would perform very frequently. And so I don't know, I was just getting a lot of experience, but then watching at the same time would be performing one show, and then somebody would be writing the next show. And it's like they're selling tickets and the show's not even written yet. And I'm just like, this is insane. And I remember we were rehearsing a show. We were supposed to open in a few weeks, and the show still wasn't completely done. And and it was a musical, and so not even all the songs had been written yet. Like we were rehearsing the first act, and we knew the second act was coming, but we didn't know what the song sounded like and stuff like that. And I just remember it was wild, but it was like the coolest experience ever because it was this group of very determined and dedicated artists that were going to pull this thing off, and the audience was coming, and we were all giving it everything that we had, and we did, man. When we opening night, that was like went off with a bang. But I remember being in there, and it was like a step up from what I was used to working with, and like I remember auditioning for the show, and there's some guy that walks in there wearing a Miss Saigon jacket, which that's a musical from a while back, not super old, but little not everybody may have heard of that now, but Miss Saigon, and he's got this jacket on, and I was like, oh, that's a cool jacket. Where'd you get that? And he's like, oh, I just got off the national tour, and I'm like, who the heck are these people I'm auditioning? This is ridiculous. And then when the play was Treasure Island, and it's a big musical version of Treasure Island, and I was a pirate, and we were doing stunt work, so we all had to go into like take sword fighting classes. They brought in these stunt choreographers and everything to show us all these combat moves. And I remember the guy that was showing us used to be a stuntman on the Dukes of Hazzard, and so he always had really cool stories to tell. And everything, but I learned a lot about doing stunts and things from him. Like that guy knew his stuff, and just remember, it was kind of fun. So just grew like that, but it all came back to wanting to tell people stories.
That's fantastic. I mean, something that sticks out to me too in you talking about that, if you'll afford me the ability to compliment you, is I found it really fascinating when we were working on Marty's and I got to meet you. You hear the term like, oh, you're going to meet this actor we have, and that might set a certain idea of what you think a person is going to be. But when I started talking with you, I found this person who was incredibly skilled at telling a story and sort of spinning a yarn, if you will, but also sharing a stage. Some actors will go in and they command the room sort of be theirs. The attention should be on them. Whenever we talked to you or interacted with you, you would immediately put out this energy of entertainment, but you'd sort of recede back to and let anyone else who wanted to step up and kind of be involved or share their story or communicate or be part of the conversation exist in that collaborative environment. And that was something that I really found appreciable about you. And it happened in our plays as well. There was always this skill of allowing yourself to be involved, but making sure everyone else got to stand in front and sort of be involved in the show, if that makes any sense.
Every storyteller has to have their moment, whether it be on stage or whether it just be in company. Like you don't want to be the one that like hogs everything. Take it. Maybe Andy Warhol's quote. Your 15 minutes. Maybe it doesn't just apply to life, but maybe that applies to social situations too. Take 15 minutes and then let someone else entertain for the rest of the time. It's like, I don't know, get in, get out.
It's like active listening, but it's active acting or active storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, contribute to where you're going to be, but don't hog it. Be happy to listen to other people.
So you've got this amazing thing going at Redlands. You're learning stuff. You're getting to step away from the quiet Mike sort of misnomer or name, nom de plume. As what like steps into like, okay, now I want to do things in Hemet. Now I'm going to kind of take the reins and start doing it. Do you just start going for shows out here? Do you go back to MSJC? Like, what's that process?
I went back to MSJC after a long time. So I'm out in Redlands at Lifehouse, and I'm now auditioning for everything that I can up there. I'm doing every show that they do. I mean, they do so many shows. I mean, literally one closes down, and the next week a new one opens. It's that quick. They're always doing shows, and they're basically performing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, they're rehearsing for the following show. And so when one closes down, bam, the next one immediately opens and they start rehearsing the one that follows that. And I was just auditioning for all of them, trying to get all the experience I could. And I broke away from the quiet stereotype. And I just saw myself like, wow, I can do this. And I'm kind of show some promise in it. And then I don't know what came over me one day, but I went up to the producer and the writer and was like, hey, I want to learn about the script writing that you guys do. And he was like, okay, is there a script you want to try writing? And that floored me right there, that he would just like stop and be like, oh, you want to try one of these? Like, I had no experience doing this or anything like it. And here he is like offering me the chance to write a script. And they had a educational series that they were doing called Life Tales. And they had plans to rent out a theater, like a theater that was bigger than Lifehouse. They wanted to, rent out an 800-seat theater and bus kids in from different schools and have them watch a show on a historical figure. And so they were going to be writing a show on that, but they hadn't been able to make it happen. The writer was just too busy with all his other stuff. And he's like, you could give this a shot. And so I went and tried it. And I would say the script I turned in was about a 50%. There was some nice moments in it, but 50%, that's still, an F. And they had to completely rewrite it. But still, a lot of my stuff was still in there. And I learned a whole lot from it. And I remember, I think I was about 25 years old at that point, 24, 25. And I was playing the part too. It was of Alexander Graham Bell. And I remember they rented out the Sturgis Theater in San Bernardino, California. And I remember pulling up and seeing on the marquee Alexander Graham Bell. And I was like, dude, and I wrote this show. I'm the lead part in this show. And I'm getting all stoked for this. And we're waiting. And it's like the first performance is about to happen. It's going to start at 9:00. And I do, the total amateur move. You're not supposed to do this, but I do it all the time. I go to the curtain and I pull it back to see who's in the audience. There is not one person there. Not one single person come to see the show. And I'm like, this is going to be a long road. But but eventually the people did start showing up. It's really like, the old phrase there is, if you build it, they will come. And they may not come right away. And but they did start showing up. And so I wrote more and more of those life tales. I did Alexander Graham Bell, Florence Nightingale, Ben Franklin, Louis Pasteur, Jackie Robinson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington Carver, Clara Barton, Thomas Edison, Harriet Tubman. I've got one on Amelia Earhart. So I, wrote all of these, and they were all performed in front of audiences for schools. Just recently did one on the California Gold Rush.
Oh, fantastic.
And they're just, little like 45 minutes to an hour, kind of what an elementary student could sit through, but they tell the story of a historical person. And so by that point in time, I'd had, written quite a few shows, and I had a few full length shows as well.
Gotcha.
Done one on Swiss Family Robinson and the story of Moses. And so then by that point in time, I went back to Mount Senecen, and I was looking for, something to kind of do closer to home now. And like my first daughter had just been born. And so leaving town wasn't, like so much of an option for me right now.
Just wasn't as feasible to keep being gone for so long.
Yeah, not like at that particular time. And then had a second daughter that was on the way, and so I went back to Mount San Jacinto and walked in, and I remember the head of the theater department. I hadn't seen him in years, and he didn't used to be the head of the theater department. He used to be the head of the theater tech department, and but now he'd taken over the whole thing. And I remember I walked in, and he looks up at me, and I recognized him right away, and he just was like, "Oh, I recognize those eyes," and he kind of talks in this drawl, and so he's like, come on in. And we sat in his office and talked, and I told him what I'd been doing, and I said, like, any chance I could do one of the original shows here? And I said, like, I wouldn't charge you anything to do it. I want to do something close to home now. I don't want to have to like drive right now, but I still would like to be involved in stuff. And they weren't using their black box theater. It was just used for storage. And he's like, well, I guess we could clean it out and we could put it on and see how it goes. And so we did the Jackie Robinson story. And people, kind of met it with, there was a lot of skeptics in there because that happens. You walk in and like, hey guys, I wrote a play. You want to be in my play? Who wants to be in my play? And people are like, yeah, yeah, this is quickly going downhill. But we got the cast that we needed, and we put it on, and we advertised it really, really well. And every seat of every performance was sold out.
Whoa.
And it was, I mean, and it was a black box theater. So we're not talking about like, like the huge 300, 400 person theater. The black box can hold, I don't know, 50, 60. So significantly less, but we sold it out. And I remember the head of the theater department after, that happened, he was like, hey, you want to go again next semester? I'm like, yes, I do. Um, and then after that, I think we did Amelia Earhart there after that. And same kind of thing. The response was really well. And then he was like, you want to go on the main stage? And then there was the pressure because he was like, let's do one of your original shows on the main stage. And that is huge pressure because, and I knew it. I knew that this was like, could be playing with fire because when people sign up for college shows, they want to do Shakespeare. They want to do, well-known plays and musicals and stuff like that. They don't want to do, Michael Tennant's original works, type thing. But we did Swiss Family Robinson there, and that was the coolest show ever. I had done it once at Lifehouse Theater, and it had some real problems with it. And so I had to go fix the problems, and I had to rewrite about 5 of the musical numbers and rewrite pages of the script and everything. But it turned out, really well. The second draft was so solid, and they built this huge treehouse on the stage, and it had a working water wheel. It had a rope ladder. You could get on it from like the top level of the treehouse and swing down. And there were pirate fights, and the choreography was like out of this world. And then the combat scenes were so cool. And that one also really, really packed out well. And so, just kind of was going after that. And it was sort of giving me a little bit of confidence as a playwright and a director that I could come back, to the place where I left as Quiet Mike and now be, having my moment on the stage. But still, every time I was on that stage, I'd get there a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I would walk the stage, and I would still remember like all the history on that stage, including my own history there of just being super shy and quiet, hiding in the corner, watching everybody else do the thing. So that's never lost on me when I think about that. And even still, when I walk through those doors, I don't direct there anymore, but still on occasion, I'll go to see a show there, and you walk in the room and just like, bam, this is the place where it happened.
That's awesome. It's kind of a grounding moment every time.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I never had that connection because I want to say it was pretty quickly after Marty's, you had mentioned to me about you were still doing the play version of Mr. Whittier's Hemet.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize that that was just another in a long line of these stories you were sharing of these historical figures. How did you
Yeah.
get connected to the Mr. Whittiers? Was that something you pursued yourself? Did someone from like Hemet or the Hemet Council reach out? Like, how did that evolve?
I was at the college doing the Amelia Earhart story, and a lady walked out, an older lady, and her name was Ann Ballo. And she walked up to me, and I didn't know at the time that this was going to be a pivotal moment for me, and she was going to be a lady that would change my life. Um, but she walked over to me and she said, "This was such a good show. The city of Hemet is going to turn 100 years old next year. Do you think you would want to write an original play on the history of Hemet?" And I'm just like, how do you respond to that? Because immediately I'm like, no, I absolutely don't want to do that. But I can't tell her that. I mean, she's just there, big smile on her face, eyes full of hope. And so I'm just like, oh, that sounds fantastic. I'll look into that. Um, and she gave me her number and everything. And she was on the centennial committee for the city of Hemet. And I guess, they were planning this huge event and everything. I, I really didn't know about any of it. I didn't even know that we were turning 100 years old. That's how little I paid attention to Hemet. But then I got home that night and I was standing in my front yard thinking about, what she had said to me. And I realized I know nothing about this city. I've lived here my entire life and I don't know anything about it. I don't know how the city got started. And I sat there, like, I looked down at my feet and I remember just thinking, like, the city's 100 years old. Who was here? Who was standing right where I am standing 100 years ago? Like, what was happening here? Were there like cowboys and shootouts, and what was going on here? I wonder if anybody ever fought over this plot of land like 100 years ago, or if it belonged to a farmer, or what was happening here. Um, and so it made me curious enough that I wanted to look into it. And then when I started to study the history of it, I got pulled in. It's really a great story of how it got started. It was super interesting.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed being involved with it. And so you do this. It's done as I don't know what the term is, but like when you had me come in because I replaced another actor who was doing Sam Temple from the original run, if I recall correctly. Might have been Chris. I can't remember for sure. But you would, I don't know what the term is called, but you're standing or sitting in seats and you sort of stand up, deliver the part to the audience, sit back down, and then the next characters kind of cycle through.
Yeah, it was done to be as like a glorified readers theater,
Gotcha. Okay.
in that sense. So they told us, like, well, there's going to be. They did have plans for it. Like, there's a reason that they wanted it done for the centennial celebration, and the mayor was going to be there, all the city council, just people from the community. We're going to come see it on the night of the centennial celebration. They had this gala planned. They had people from the Ramona pageant there and everything, which is the other, the yearly pageant that we do in town, and it's the California State Play. And so they had people from that out there, and they brought in people from our sister city in Japan. Now, I did not know that Hemet had a sister city, but we have one in Japan, and they flew out their dignitaries and everything. It's I got pictures of myself with them, and it was just that was so cool. And I guess I've heard that the script of the play is in a museum out there. At least that's what somebody told me because there's a Hemet museum out in our sister city in Japan.
Oh, that's
And
fantastic.
yeah, I had to look this up. I was like, is this true? Is somebody telling me a story like I would tell them a story? But I had to look this up. But yeah, it is true. I can't remember the name of it, but um, I I found some information about it online and the write up on it. But it was just supposed to be like, there was this little stage. There were no costumes. There was no set. There was no lights. There was no budget. Basically, we just sat in these chairs, got up, and it was like storytelling. But to me, storytelling at its finest, even though it didn't have any of the big theatrical elements that you might otherwise have if you go to a play. But their hope was that it could be used to go to elementary schools afterwards and kind of tell the story of Hemet. Like we could tour it around um, to the community, to the different schools, and teach the history of Hemet. And that worked perfect because elementary schools, they don't often have these, big budget sets or costumes or,
No.
anything like that. This was written just to go in and be able to tell the story wherever. You could do it in somebody's kitchen if you wanted to and have it be just as effective.
Great acoustics.
Um, followed up with a performance of Pudding Babies in the same kitchen.
Yeah.
But and then we actually did do that. After that, we went kind of touring to some different schools, and we even got a grant from Target to pay for some of the expenses and such. And so that was pretty cool. But then Daniel, come full circle here. He came up and said, "Hey, what would you think about maybe turning that into a movie?" And that, everything just changed right there. And if you look at like probably the top projects of my life and the most influential, like talk about a project that then leads to something else, then leads to something else, it would probably be that one.
So yeah, you're mentioning that it's a changing environment. Daniel's reached out to you. It's followed a path where you're like unexpected that all of this is going to keep following along, and it's ending up on TV all the time.
Yeah. And I realized that we really should have worked out a royalty agreement with the city of Hemet because I would be rich by now.
I still get texts all the time from my mom being like, "Yeah, your face is on TV."
I think it's funny when I'll go places and they'll be like, "I know you." Like, well, you don't, but um,
You're
you may
that
have heard me
Baron guy, aren't you?
you may have heard me tell you a story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say too, the being able to shoot in Calico Ghost Town, like that for me was an amazing moment as like a sort of aspiring actor level of getting to walk around in cowboy regalia to do a scene in Calico Ghost Town, be involved in this story.
Um, this goes back to just my initial thought of Daniel when we were doing Marty's Magnificent Dayglow Dreamathon. When he really starts to talk about how he's going to put this movie together and he starts to build his team and costumes start coming in and set pieces. And then he's telling me he's arranged for us to go out to this ranch to ride horses and we're going to go shoot in Calico Ghost Town. I'm sitting there like, holy cow. I mean, if anybody, I'll just put this out there for anybody that's going to work with Daniel Maggio, you should just realize that you're going to get somebody who's going to give their all to you. He is never going to do anything 99%. He is going to take whatever your vision is, and he is going to just accelerate it to levels that you never even thought were possible. It's just, he's going to take your vision and it's going to explode. And I couldn't believe the stuff that he was pulling off. I mean, between he and Wesley and Steven doing this stuff, and then us getting to go to Calico Ghost Town and shooting in that little cantina at nighttime after it had closed down, and just like what a wild time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that you mentioned how you never give an audience less than 100%. And we as creatives seem to be finding those other people that Daniel's the same type of person. He's never going to give a project, like you said, 99%. It's going to be all of it. And so it's kind of fascinating that we all ended up orbiting each other 2 degrees.
Well, I think that you seek that out because right away, if you see somebody that's giving less than that, it's like, well, I don't want to align myself with that. I want to look for other people that are going to go all in at
Yeah.
what they. Um, and I do want to clarify something, because there are areas that I cannot give my all to because I'm not good at them. And that's where you have to have a team. Like costuming, I am so bad at costuming. Um, but for that Hemet movie, we got Deborah Dawn Shockey on board.
Yes.
And she is like a costumer's dream. And she, you know what? She's not even 100%. She's like 200%.
Yeah.
Like I, her work ethic is unbelievable. And her dedication when she decides to get something done, unbelievable. Like even to this day, like I don't know. It's just she's never done anything that isn't excellent. And so I think that's, the other part of it where you can't give 100% because you're just not, I mean, you would if you could, but you're just not good at it. You find other people on your team that can help you with it. And so that's the big part of building your creative team.
I'll say that's something we really enjoyed seeing kind of at the film festival as well, like the Hemet Film Festival, was that there were so many people who were understanding that idea that it's not a monolithic singular approach. You need to find people or teams and people that can shore up a soft side and make the whole project more than the sum of its parts. Something I hate as a term, and we've all probably heard in business, is the idea of synergy. It sounds like a business buzzword. But I actually discovered not that long ago that the at least business-based terminology for synergy is when the parts equal out more than the sum. So that when you add 1 + 1 and you get 3, like that's the actual definition of it in business. And I think that's something we see a lot here is that a short film or a small play or a story that you're trying to tell, when you connect with other people who have that skill and that drive and that passion, it suddenly becomes so much more than just the simple aspect of the parts. And so I think it's really fascinating that we kind of keep seeing that from all these different conversations we have.
Yeah, and with what Daniel is doing with the film festival, I mean, because he makes a lot of his own movies, and he'll say like, come see my movie, but then he does the film festival, and it's this invitation, like, come show your movie. Let's come together with this group of creative people and tell your story. And with some of these short films, people might not come out and see, if all you were doing is like, hey, there's going to be a 15-minute show at the theater tonight. Come out and see this short movie. People probably wouldn't come out and see that. But if you're like, we've got a ton of 15-minute movies, we've got some full-length stuff going on. We've got this, we've got that all together in one big festival. Come out and hear all these people tell their stories.
Absolutely.
It's a very cool opportunity he's created here, and it's going to open the door for so many people to be able to do what they can to tell their story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sheer amount of people that showed up for this first year was insane, and people driving down from all over. And
Yeah.
I think 2024 is going to be fascinating just to see like what it can grow out into. It's kind of that finding our niche and getting more comfortable and figuring out how to help more people. I mean, we're in talks of figuring out how to move it to San Diego too, so that we can help like underserved students out in this area. Like, it's a lot of really cool things we can do with it, and I'm excited for the future of it. Hopefully, we'll get
Well,
some Michael Tennant stuff out there soon too.
yeah. I mean, what's interesting about it is that Hemet, it's you typically hear people saying like, "Oh man, there's not a lot to do out here. Hemet is boring and stuff like that." And it's not that we don't have the talent and stuff out here. It's that we don't have a lot of places to display the talent. So
Yep.
people will end up leaving town or to go somewhere else. But seems like all it needs is somebody like Daniel to come in and be like, no, let's give people the opportunity. And there are people like, are you kidding? A film festival in Hemet? Yeah, a film festival in Hemet. And watch what happens. And boom, the community does come to life because now there is an opportunity.
Yeah. Everyone had the talent there. They just didn't have the outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're coming close to the end, Mike, but I feel like there's still a lot to touch on. Is there anything you really wanted to lean into? We kind of just got up to the Martys, but there's been a whole life lived past that point for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Anything you want me to talk about before we hit the end?
Sure. I mean, well, let's at least talk on the most recent Daniels film, the Big Book. You were in that,
I was, yeah.
and
Yep.
there's a great something from Evan Lopez where he just sort of was recording the local music and things going on. But there's a great scene of you reciting the Raven while people are getting set up
I,
for the Big Book.
I didn't even know that. I
Yeah,
remember him filming me. I didn't know that that went into a movie.
yeah.
That's funny.
It just cuts to like Michael Tennant, local actor. Like I think is the way he described it, and it's like you without any prompting, just going into the story. Nevermore, I'm pointing to it.
Well, he was wanting to know about my tattoo. So, you see it?
Excellent. Yeah.
I walked into the bank, just a few days back, and one of the ladies behind the counter was like, "Oh, your tattoo," and I was like, "Yeah, Nevermore," and she didn't know the reference. I was like, "Do you know where it's from?" And she's like, "No." I was like, "It's from a poem. You never heard the poem?" "No, from Edgar Allan Poe." And like, how can you not know this? I thought everybody did. But
You expect it
yeah,
to be
so
part of the cultural zeitgeist, right?
I did. Um, I don't. I know it, so everybody must know it. It's I don't know. I guess it's like that TV show that everybody's talking about, and then you find the one person that's never heard it. Like, what? How can you not know that? But yeah, he was asking me about my tattoo, and so I was just like, yeah, it's from the poem. But I got it in Baltimore, the tattoo, where Edgar Allan Poe lived, and I remember I went to see his house, and then I went to the burial site, which is just a few blocks from his house, and then I went and got the tattoo, and I got that just I'm one of the, and I'm sure that many people have it memorized, but I'm the only person that I know who's had it memorized, and I've been performing that poem for quite a few years, and so I finally just decided I would it meant enough to me to get a very large tattoo.
It's literally part of you.
Yeah, yeah, be part of me. That would be important to have a tattoo. That's the only tattoo that I have at present, but does mean a lot to me. That poem means a lot to me. I've performed it many, many times in many, many places.
That's I do love those connection points. I have a tattoo over my shoulder of Death and Lady Fate rolling dice from Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, which is one of my favorite sort of lyrical ballads. And what was fascinating was Walter Savell, who played Peepaw in Marty's Magnificent, actually did a reading of it. I want to say right after we'd finished like principal filming on Marty's, he did a
Mm-hmm.
reading of it at the Temecula Library. So there's this really fascinating, like Daniel and I got to go out and sit in the theater and watch Peepaw recite. It was specifically the chapter on like water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink because it was Temecula was connecting it to like drought and stuff like that. Because libraries, you always got to connect stuff to a certain important cultural phenomenon. But I love when we can take those stories and they matter so much to us and we sort of literally bring them to be part of us.
Yeah, and then share it with everybody. Sharing your story, sharing the story that you love with everybody.
Yeah, and I mean
Just bring it up.
to bring it full circle, that's the why
Yeah.
we did the Hemet Film Festival. It's why we do this podcast is we want to share these stories, but we want it to be known that we want other people to be comfortable sharing them and finding these outlets. That's why we hope 2024 will be a chance for even more people to be able to express themselves that didn't even know they had the option in Hemet.
All right. You may have noticed the hair has gotten a bit long, shaggy here. This is probably the longest I've ever had it, but it's for an upcoming part that I'm doing in March. So I'm writing an original show on a singer named Rigby Redd, and
Okay.
I got this idea. Um, I guess over the course of a few years in watching different performers at the end of their career. Um, Like you know Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do. I'm going to give you the same look as the people that don't know the Raven. No, but they were so huge, like back in the day. And then I watched a video recently, and it was either of Peter or Paul by themselves, and they were at this little fair, and there was not many people at all in the audience, and just up there singing songs on his guitar. He's much older now. He's not in his heyday anymore. And I remember he was telling the audience at the end, he's like, "You can come by to see me afterwards. You don't have to buy any merchandise. You can just come and say hi to me." And very very nice. But there was hardly anybody there, and you're like, "Man, this guy used to be like a command such an audience, and now there's nobody. His crowd is gone." And and I've seen that a few other times with singers, and it it just must be so crushing to realize you're still there and your audience has moved on.
Yeah.
And that was the basis for this country singer that is, kind of nearing the very end of his career. And he was like this huge country singer, and he's got nobody left now. And I decided though, like in playing around with it, I was like, well, if he's going to be a country singer, what did he sing? And I decided like, well, I should give him an album. Like I should legit go back and write a country western album and release it, and then write the play on that. People will actually think he's a real singer, but he's not a real singer. He's a fictional character. But this fictional character has a very real album. And
I love that.
so that album is you can listen to it on Spotify or find it on YouTube or iTunes or wherever. It's basically on all the platforms. And I'm doing a second album right now, and the rehearsals for the actual show are going to start coming up here either at the end of the month or the very first part of February for the show. So it's going to be cool. I'm really looking forward to it. But it's going to be a big show of country music, lots of music, lots of country dance.
That's awesome. I love the multimedia approach and kind of the creating this whole story of this character.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
If you want to listen to the music, Rigby Redd, RIGBYREDD. Yeah, you should check out the music and see if you like it.
Well, Mike, I thank you incredibly for being on the episode with us. So thank you, listeners, so much for tuning in. And Michael Tennant, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for asking me.